Hello and welcome to Note Doctors. My name is Paul.
My name is Jenn.
My name is Ben.
And we are your hosts. We are all university music theory instructors who are passionate about music theory and music theory instruction. In this podcast, we will be talking about all things theory with some of the best music theory teachers in the country. If you want to know more about music theory and the most effective and innovative ways to teach it, this is the podcast for you. Hello and welcome back to Note Doctors, the music theory and pedagogy podcast. Well, it's been a while since I've given that intro, Jen.
I know, it's true. It's been a minute. We've all had a lot going on. We were all on search committees at the same time.
That's right.
Mine is ongoing. That alone is a big thing.
Yeah, so we had a lot of things going on in 2024, and so we just kind of hit the ground running with our real lives and our real jobs, because you may not know this, listener, but this is not our job.
Even though we love it.
We love it, but we had other things come up, and life happens, but we are back, and we appreciate you still tuning in and downloading episodes, and so we'll be back in the groove of it soon. And so our guest, we're really excited for, a fellow Texan from UT El Paso. But before we talk to Dr. Jarvis, we did want to mention that our next coming episodes for the next year are going to be sponsored by someone. We actually have a sponsorship, which also means we have to make more episodes. And so we're excited that the Texas Women's University School of the Arts and Design is going to be our official sponsor for the podcast. There was a grant that we were able to receive from them that will support the creation of a website and also still pay for our podcast hosting and things like that. So huge shout out to TWU. And
yes, thank you.
We really appreciate it. And so if you've enjoyed the podcast and if you enjoy them in the future, you can thank Texas Women's University School of the Arts and Design. Before we get into our episode, let's learn a little bit more about Brian Jarvis.
Brian Edward Jarvis is Assistant Professor of Music Theory at the University of Texas at El Paso. His research interests include techniques of phrase expansion in musical middles, large-scale music analysis in films by Joel and Ethan Cohen, statistical properties of form in early video game music, defining verse-chorus differences in recent popular music, and using computers pedagogically to build advanced music-related skills. He has publications in Music Theory Online, Music Theory Spectrum, SMTV, the Journal of Music Theory Pedagogy, and he is one of the authors of version 2 of the Open Music Theory Project. His computer programming projects include BriFormer, a form and analysis tool, Staff Master, a pedagogically oriented staff notation software, and Auralayer, a timbre analysis tool. It's Auralayer. You'll understand why I said that if you listen to the whole episode. So stay tuned to figure out why I just corrected my own pronunciation. Auralayer.
The way we teach form is so weird. If you think about textbooks, like the first form chapter in a textbook is not a chapter called How do you do musical form? What is musical form, right? It's like the name of a form. That's how you start. And in reality, right, it's very different. Like, it probably makes sense to talk about what you're doing first. Or maybe you could go, I'm sure good teachers can handle it all, but it is an odd approach. And so that's kind of what my idea is. Like, just start with form in general, and then if you realize it's something, go ahead and add some terminology in there. But and ultimately, if you don't find a name, if you don't know the name, don't worry.
So, Brian, we are so pleased to have you on the podcast to talk about all your really interesting work in music theory and with popular music, and your coding ability is crazy. It's awesome. So we're really excited to chat with you. Though before we get into that conversation, we do like to ask our guests a little bit about how they got into music theory. So I haven't played the game of life in a long time, but I don't remember getting the music theory professor card when we were getting our careers. And so I'm assuming you became interested in doing that later than age 8 or 9. And so tell us a little bit about how you got into music theory.
Sure. Well, first I want to say thanks for having me. I really love this podcast. I listen to it a lot. So
We love you too.
A few. It's a really unique thing. So I'm really excited about it. So yeah, as you said, when I talked to the career advisor, they didn't say, I got an idea for you. Why don't you do music theory? They said, Brian, you should be an engineer. And I was like, I don't know what that means. I have no idea what you're talking about. I've never met one. But I think that's what they would say each time. Go be an engineer. They were right. I just didn't understand at the time. But I had a really late introduction to music. I didn't start playing music until I was 20. And so I started my first piano lessons when I was 20. And so I still remember a lot of it, like what it was like, that experience. And when I started taking piano lessons, my teacher would teach me music theory, and she would say, I would say, I think I want to go on and be a musician. I want to get a music degree. And she was like, huh, really? You're 20, you just started, you want to do this? And I'm like, and now I know, like how crazy that sounds and how that's not a great idea. But I was like, yeah, I like this music a lot. And as she was teaching me theory, and I was taking theory classes at the community college, I was like, this is really helping me. Like, this helps so much to learn my music. And all the music, I realized later, was music I was playing. Like, oh, these are people I know. I love these examples. Like, it's piano music, and the theory books are just filled with it, So I was like, this is perfect. Like, who wouldn't like this? This is so cool. So I took the community college classes, and I remember a professor that was teaching, and I remember sitting there thinking, I could do this, I could do this, because I understood it. It made sense, and I was right, but I didn't quite understand what that even meant. Be a music theorist, I think I'm getting closer to an understanding of what that might mean, but I certainly didn't know what it was at the time. So I applied for schools after like a year or two of lessons, and I practiced. Like, as soon as I started, I got a book on practicing, which is really rare for like when you're 8 years old, you do not do that. You just do what your parents say. But I just really liked the music a lot, and so I got a book on practicing, and it was like, look, you need to practice 3 hours every day. And I was like, what? Yeah, okay. So just right away started doing that. So I made some pretty quick progress. And I ended up going to the University of Missouri, Kansas City, which is a conservatory in Kansas City, Missouri. But it's also part of the university, and it's a really great program. But I applied to a number of places, but that school had 4 semesters of piano sight reading courses and 4 semesters of piano accompanying courses. And I was like, that sounds amazing. I really want to do that. That sounds so cool. And so I interviewed as a music theory major. And I was like, that's what I want to do. And which is, I realize now, still pretty weird. But then, so all my degrees are in music theory, even my undergrad one. But in my undergrad, I didn't really understand much about theory. It was chords and Roman numerals and embellishing tones. You know how it is. Pretty normal, I think, understanding of it. Which is to say, I didn't really understand it very much. But then I went to Bowling Green State University, which I understand Paul also went.
That's right. Go Falcons.
Yeah, which is a great program. And really enjoyed my time there. And I started to understand music theory a little bit better. I still knew I wanted to be a music theory teacher, like even before I started undergrad. So that was always the goal. But then I kind of thought music theory was like the books that we would study. I thought that's kind of how it was transmitted. And I went to my first music theory conference then. Actually, TS&T was my first music theory conference. I went there when I was interviewing at the University of Houston. They were having a TS&T, and they were like, oh, you should stop by and listen to some stuff. And it's so interesting how little I understood what they were asking me to do. We were in like a classroom, and there was a person talking, and I swear, I was just like, what is this? Now I know, but man, at the time, I had no idea. But then my master's program, I started getting interested in form a lot. I really like musical form. And the PhD program, which I did at Florida State University, then I started to understand how important journals were and like communication and conferences and how important those were. And so I think it really started to dawn on me then, like, oh, this is what this discipline is, or at least can be. You know, it can be a number of things, but at least the way I wanted to do it. And then I did my dissertation on large-scale film music analysis, and I ended up at the University of Texas at El Paso, which I started in 2015, and that's where I am now. And I submitted my tenure file at the beginning of this year, and so I'll find out at the beginning of next fall what happened.
Yay!
Yay!
So no red flags yet. That's how you look out for it, right? No red flags.
That's good. You're just making it up that ladder step by step, and so that's great. I'm sure it'll be great. And so let's kind of talk a little bit about kind of some of the work that you've done, kind of along with that engineering background, or maybe that engineering acumen or engineering proclivity, right? Because what you're able to build and construct, I think, is something that not most normal music theorists can do. And so how did you get into that?
Well, you know, I told you I wanted to go to UMKC because of the piano sight reading. I think any instrument, piano is my instrument, but like the piano is just the most interesting gamepad, you know, video game gamepad to me. So I was like, I really want a video game. I want a piano sight reading video game that's amazing, that I can't stop playing, that just makes me the best sight reader, you know. And I was like, I wonder if does that exist? You know, is that real? And I looked into some things, and the things that are out there are like pretty, especially at the time. So this was 2005 or something. It's not great. And if anything, it's aimed at the absolute most beginners, you know. And like, I don't need that. I want something like, where's the level of like the video game level where it's like you're a choral director or you're a choral pianist. Like, where's that? So I don't think that exists. And so that's actually what got me into programming. I was like, oh, maybe, is it possible to like make something like that? And reflecting now, I'm like, you know, pick something easier, some easier project. That's so hard and at every level. And music and programming is pretty tough. Notation of music and programming that is hard. So that's kind of where it started. Like I was like, I want to do something like that. And I would try to learn programming languages like C, and it was really hard. And I didn't understand, how do you go from these things to music notation? And I didn't know anybody to talk to. And I just was like, I don't even know if I could do this. So I just kind of would dabble. But then when I went to my master's program, they said we could take, at Bowling Green, we could take other classes for free at the university, whatever you wanted. And I was like, okay, let's start with some programming, because that was impossible, so I'll try that. So I ended up taking a couple of 2-3 classes, computer programming classes there. And after taking them, I wasn't really able to still do much of anything, it felt like. But I would start to get little projects, and that's what I realized would happen. If I got a project that I could actually do, then I could level up. And so like some of the first ones that I did were like, did you work with Bill Lake, Paul?
No, I did not, because I was actually a composition student at Bowling Green.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah.
Here we are with Brian taking the programming classes and Paul taking composition classes.
I know.
And, man.
We all end up in the same place.
Yeah. Well, he had they have a really intense undergrad aural skills program. At least for me, I still think it's too hard. Even today, I'm like, you shouldn't be that hard. But they have like an atonal component of it in aural skills 4, and they use the Lars Edlund book, Modus Novus. If you guys ever use that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's intense. And I think it's a really cool book. I don't use it anymore or anything like that. But basically, we had to pass some sort of like, probably, yeah.
I think it is, yeah.
Yeah, it's
I may or may not
have a
copy of that.
I also may or may not have a copy of it.
Well, it's like we had to like pass out as a theorist, like pass some sort of level of achievement with aural skills and theory. And theory wasn't a problem, but for aural skills, it was like, dictate this atonal melody. And I was like, no, I just can't do this, you know? So that's what kind of got me started. I was like, oh, maybe I can make a program that would generate these for me, because it's super methodical. Like this chapter is perfect fourths and minor seconds and their combinations, and that's it, you know. And so I was like, oh, I can wrap my head around that. So kind of started making a program with that and had like little success there, but it was like using Java, so it was kind of locked into my computer at the time. But so then when I moved to, I didn't do a whole lot of programming when I moved to Florida, but I started getting into Excel, and that kind of helped a little bit along the way with grading and everything. But Nancy Rogers would have put all her assignments on her website, and it would just be like, this week we're doing this, click on this, and here's the PDF, you know, and it would have it like that. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And so when I moved to El Paso, I was like, I want to do that. I don't want to do Blackboard. And so that's kind of where that started. The web was so much easier for me to deal with. I can see what's happening, and it was just easier to debug, and there's lots of help. So that was kind of like the first thing I did was like make a website to do something like she had done. And then I started learning JavaScript that first fall, and I would just have little projects at a time. And so my first project was this rhythmic pattern dictation software where you like, instead of doing note by note dictation, you do like beat by beat notation. You kind of drag them or click them in. You say, oh, beat 2, I heard this pattern, and beat 1, I heard this pattern. And so it kind of would just build like that, and I would integrate those into my classes. So my classes are all hybrid, and some of them are fully online. And so I started just developing this like gigantic library of music theory questions. And at some point, I started to, I'm sure you guys will feel some sympathy with me if you teach oral skills, started to get really bored of oral skills examinations, the dictation examinations. Because you know how in class where you're like, sometimes it's really boring, crazy boring stuff, like just an interval or something like that, but you play it and then you like wait and then you play it again, and there's not even enough time to have any thought that's worth having in between that time, except for, oh my God, I'm so bored. So then I always teach classes back to back, and have since I started here. And so it's annoying the first hour, but crazy annoying the second hour. But it's not terrible. It's not hard work, it's not that big of a deal, but it just is, my mind can't properly shut off for the period of time. But then the worst is, like a group of students have some sort of university function, and they can't be there for that exam, and then you have to like make it up in your office, maybe more than one time, and like, the first couple of years is whatever, but man, it really just started to bother me. And
you're triggering, I think you're triggering all of us, probably many listeners right now.
Yeah, it seems like a solvable problem, and I remembered back to Gene Trantham at Bowling Green.
Yeah.
Did you ever have anything?
Yeah.
So he would do this really cool thing for placement exams, which is he just sat down like in front of a recorder and then recorded himself giving the exam with all the time in between, like, now here's hearing number 2, and then would just play it. And so it's like an hour-long recording. And when the kids would come in, he would give a TA, and he would say, just give these papers out, press play, wait till it's over, collect the papers, and give them back. I was like, I think he truly understands how annoying that stuff is. And so when I was like, oh, I'd really like to do something like that, but it would be modular, where like I could just make a new test. I wouldn't have to record the whole thing. I would just put the examples up there. And so that was how a lot of this stuff started. I had to kind of level up quite a bit to understand notation, which was really difficult. It still is ties and octave non-equivalence and note head alignment when there's, oh my God, it just really is a lot. And so it took a while to kind of comb out a lot of the issues, but ultimately now I have this program where I just say, this one has 4 hearings, do 15 seconds between each hearing or a minute between each hearing. And it's just my voice saying, oh, get ready for the first hearing, the students, they hear over and over again. So that was a kind of a big leap into the programming. And then I kind of just did little projects along the way, but it was always like a problem to be solved. Like it was something I wanted. And I thought if I could solve this one aspect of it, maybe I could, figure it out. But there was like a lot of self-learning. But I took a number of classes. I've probably taken like 6 programming classes and a number of like online things through like Coursera and that sort of thing. Lots of books. But yeah, it's fun. It's fun because how in musical performance, like live performance, kind of everything needs to be right that time. That's the goal. programming is super awesome because you can just make a mistake and then it'll be like, oh, I'm broken, you know, and it doesn't matter. You just go back and fix it, you know, and then it's so interesting. It's like, it's a type of patience that I need, you know, to be successful.
Well, it sounds like, and correct me if I'm not synthesizing this correctly, Brian, that even from the beginning, your aims were pedagogical and almost like gamifying. Like, how do I make this like not only fun, but how do I learn something from it? And then like, how do I kind of take that process and transfer it into like an online format for my students that's like really 21st century forward and like really adaptable to different learners, really adaptable to different situations, and adaptable to different LMS systems and even different classes, right? Because you're now have expanded to different softwares that are more oriented towards form and oriented towards timbre. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you came to develop those.
Yeah. So I taught musical form and phrase structure and phrase expansion. That's apparently it's my favorite stuff. I just keep coming back to it. I didn't know that. You know how that happens? You just like, I guess that's who I am. But I was lucky enough to get that teaching assignment when I started here at Bowling Green, is teach the form and analysis class, which I was like, thought that was great. And so I did like a mostly Kaplan sort of approach. You know, you pick a book and work with it. And it worked out pretty well. I thought the content was good. I loved learning it, you know. But then the second year, my good friend John Peterson at James Madison University, we went to FSU together. And he called up and he's like, let's do some work together. What do you think? And also I'm teaching a form and analysis class. Can we talk about that, you know? And so we sat down and we met and we worked on a form and analysis class together and synchronized our classes, so much so that we even had like a collaborative final project between our universities.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, it was really fun. And so the goal was that they would have a final project that was about teaching their piece to someone, and they would create an assignment of their piece, and then they would create a grading key, and they would give it to the student at the other university, and they would watch their video, and it's like a PowerPoint video presentation, you know, with their little face in there, and they would get that feedback, the homework back, and they would see like, oh, I guess I didn't do that right. You know, that whole thing that you learn from teaching, right? That cycle, like, because that's what John and I were thinking, like, how do we do that for students? Just teach it, learn you did it wrong, and then get better. Like that, it's such an efficient way, you know, to improve. And they took it really seriously too. You're like, these are students from another university. I have no idea what's going on, you know, and so it was really cool. But we wrote an article about this a year or two later in the Journal of Music Theory Pedagogy. That's what that article is kind of about, is fostering this long-term motivation. And we were able to say, you're going to have to do this, you know, the final project, and kind of have this weekly motivation. But after a couple years, I just kind of, the whole Kaplan thing, I like Kaplan. I've done a lot with it. But I want them to just be able to do form wherever it happens. The goal was not classical music. I just wanted to teach form. And it's not like there's like 40 books on form and you're just like, oh, I'll take this one. Like, there's just so few. It's so strange. And so that was kind of bothering me year after year. I was like, I want more out of this. And I would talk to John and we'd be like, our favorite thing was the project, you know. Can I just have that? Can I just have a course that's just projects? You know, that's the only part that I thought was super cool anyways, because I would just let them pick out whatever music they wanted, you know, within reason, to protect them. You know, if they were like, I think I'm going to do a whole Brahms symphony, and you're like, no, like,
No, you don't.
Yeah.
No, you don't.
I like you too much to let you go down that road. Let's keep it within reason. Let's try an intermezzo, okay? But it was great because, you know, they were so motivated at the time. This is a piece of music they care about, and they would do more than I would ask, and that was so interesting to me. Like that they just kept having more questions about it, and they weren't done. They didn't even know when they were done. You know, just like when you do analysis, you don't know when you're done. It's just you just keep going until you run out of time, I guess. And so that's what I was like. Oh gosh, I wish I could just do that. Just only projects, and that they pick out all the music. I'm kind of got tired of say, here's my music and I know all about it, Do you? And like, no, that's not right, And it sounds strange to like reflect on it that way because that's how we all do it, right? That's so normal, and it's how we're taught, and so, but at the same time, it is an odd teaching model sometimes. So when COVID hit, I think the fall 2019 is where I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to change this up and figure out how to make a larger change. And then COVID hit, and then we went all online, and I was like, okay, so they're giving me the option. Do I want to do a fully online class? I'm like, yes, I like computers. I have all of this material I've been like assembling for years, so like, I'm kind of actually ready for this. But I was like, now would be the time to take this form and analysis class and like just do a fully online one, project based. And I was like, okay, how are they going to do that if they're just picking all different genres? What's that even going to look like? And so it kind of required either I assemble a bunch of different formal theories and have them read them all, or just write a more general approach to theory. And so that's what I ended up deciding upon. And so on my website, there's my musical form and general approach that I'm working on. Because I've done a lot of different types of forms. Like my training is obviously classical, but I've done a lot with musical theater and with film music and video game music and popular music. And they're so similar. They're not that different, but we kind of act like they're different. And like, yeah, it depends on what the type of person you are, I think, honestly. Like I have fuzzy definitions of most things, and some people have really crisp, rigid definitions. So I think for those people, they don't feel it that way, but I do. Like, an intro in popular music is the same thing as a Kaplan intro to a phrase. Like that's the same thing at some level, right? And so that's what kind of direction I went. Like if I can come out with a more general approach to that, and I started really losing a belief that anybody needs to know any particular vocabulary, which is a dangerous path to go down. I don't know if I fully recommend that. But I started believing there's more freedom possible for me. I really have to be certain that they know what a presentation is. I don't think that they have to know what that is or other things. So I started writing this theory, and it kind of it's like the approach is start general, and then if you realize it's something that you've heard of or a form that you've known, then go ahead and apply that terminology. But don't start that way. And because, the way we teach form is so weird. If you think about textbooks, like the first form chapter in a textbook is not a chapter called How do you do musical form? What is musical form, right? It's like the name of a form.
Yeah.
That's how you start.
Binary, right? That's what's
Or start of a form. Phrase.
Phrase. Period. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
As if all music functions like that.
Yeah.
Right. And in reality, right, it's very different. Like it probably makes sense to talk about what you're doing first. Or maybe you could go, I'm sure good teachers can handle it all, but it is an odd approach. And so that's kind of what my idea is. Like, just start with form in general, and then if you realize it's something, go ahead and add some terminology in there. But and ultimately, if you don't find a name, if you don't know the name, don't worry. Like, really don't worry. And a lot of the students do themes from television series and video games, and they don't have named forms, like a lot. And so it's like trying to get them, they're super uncomfortable finishing an analysis without a name. They don't like that. And I guess music theorists and everybody else doesn't really like that so much either. I guess that's why we have all of them.
You start narrowing down your repertoire until you
This
have
is
these
a-
very crisp definitions, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. And so I wanted it to be so they can just pick anything from any genre. And so I have to coach them throughout the semester and be like, remember, don't worry. It doesn't matter if you don't come up with the name. But if you think it does, then go ahead. I remember this presentation by Hepikowski, James Hepikowski, which I loved him and Warren Darcy's book on sonata theory. I like and I've read a lot. But Hepikowski gave this presentation at SMT where he was talking about how the Queen of the Night aria is a sonata form, and he was showing all the deformations. And I was like, no, you've taken a round peg and you tried to fit it in a square hole, and you broke the box on the way in. But it's if that can be sonata form, I don't know if anything can't be sonata form. And so it was like, I think there was a preconceived notion of, I think it might be there. And students, this is so normal for students, right? They bring in any piece, I think this is sonata form. And you're like, well, who's saying this all the time? I don't know where they get those ideas. But that kind of is what it reminded me. That's a normal tendency to try to fit it into one of the names, start there, and make it work. So I didn't want to do that. I wanted to, kind of go the other way.
I love that.
And
yeah.
And did you guys use that software, Audio Timeliner, Variations Audio Timeliner ever?
Mm-mm.
I have seen it and experimented with it. Yep.
Yeah. So Brent Jorgensen wrote a software that's very, very similar to my software, BriFormer. And I thought it was really cool. I discovered it in my PhD program, and I was like, wow, this is so awesome. I wish we could have the students do it. And they make these little bubble diagrams, I think is what he calls them. But I kind of ran into problems right away because I like really complex phrase structure things. I like elisions. I like phrases where it doesn't have a beginning, phrases where it doesn't have an end, phrases where it starts as a primary theme and it changes to a transition, or it starts as a codetta and it changes into transition. I want to represent that, visually, kind of see that sort of thing. And so I was like, this would be a cool software to use for this course, but it's a little hard to use these days, especially for modern students. Maybe they don't have a laptop, or installing software is difficult, and maintaining a file system is difficult. And in some ways, it's like, maybe this is a good opportunity to crack down and be like, okay, this is how files work. This is what a file extension is. But I didn't really exactly care so much about it. I just wanted them to do the analysis. So right when COVID hit, I was like, I think if I can solve a certain aspect of diagramming things visually through programming, which is the hierarchy, if I can make the hierarchy make sense. Like, so for example, if you're trying to diagram just like a sentence structure, you'd have your two little basic ideas, but you wouldn't be able to start a group above that, like in the center of that basic idea. Like, that would be not right. And so I was like, if I could solve those little weird rules like that, then I think I might be able to do this. And so over the summer of 2020, that's when I wrote the beta version of BriFormer, and made it as part of this class, and all their assignments would be BriFormer. And what I wanted them to do is, like, all they need is a YouTube link. That's it. Find any audio on YouTube, paste it in there, and just go ahead and get started. And what was so cool to me about Brent's Audio Timeliner was it really proved that you can do form without knowing anything else. You just like, this happened here, they're the same, this is different. And you can like express form like really easily. And so I like really believed in what he was going for there. So what I wanted is like, okay, I want it to be online, I want it to be in a browser, no installation, no updates, just go to the place, get your YouTube link, get started, and then be able to share that with a link. You can also save files, but most people just share it with a link, and they post it on like a discussion board, and they say, here's my analysis, and then you can have other people interact. So that's kind of how it started. There's many pitfalls and many reasons people wouldn't want to do what I've done, which is to say, go ahead and everyone pick out their own piece next week. You can just imagine why people don't do that. Right? It's impractical. So what I realized is, if I did that, it'd be in my nature to try to grade them all. Create a grading key for them all, which is, I wanted to make that so that was absolutely impossible. Like, it would just be so stupid to actually try to do that every week, doing that. It would be a total waste of time. Well, not a waste of time. There wouldn't be enough time to do it. So instead, I was thinking about what John and I had worked on with those final projects, and like, it's not my feedback that I'm interested in. I'm interested in you grading things and thinking about feedback. The students, I want them to go through that. And so that's what I ended up doing, making a form analysis class that is just the students pick their own music, other students evaluate it on a rubric, and then they have to evaluate other students on a rubric, and then they try it again, and they try it again. And it's not like a concepts-based class, though I do introduce concepts as we go. It's kind of instead embracing the musical wilderness that's very real. Like, you go out and look at a piece and it has things you've never seen before, and I want them to hit that every time so that it's just normal to not know. So that's kind of the birth of that program, and I've kind of cleaned it up over the years each time I teach the class. I taught it like 3 times that way. And so I usually update it each year, and the students have helped clean out the absolute great majority of bugs. I don't think there's any honest bugs with the actual program at this point, and that's because of my brave students who have helped me. They're like, hey, Dr. Jarvis, I was working on this, and I worked on this analysis for 2 hours, and then all of a sudden I pressed undo and it disappeared. I'm like, yeah, interesting things like that.
That's a bug.
That's a bug. Yeah. So those great students helped really make it much better.
That's great. When you teach form the first time, you're kind of following the book, like you said. And so you are teaching all of these very rigid terms and usually, unless it was fairly recent, like I taught form the first time as a grad student. So it was a while ago. And I don't even know how they put me in charge of that class, but it was really great. I'm glad they did. But I remember like just walking through this book in this very sort of rigid way, and students would ask these wonderful and very real musical questions like, well, but this feels like a shift in temperament in the music, but there's not a cadence there. And I'm like, well, then it is not a section, because like,
That's right.
you know what you're doing. And I teach it much more like blurry now too.
Yeah.
In fact, the first 2 class periods I give pieces that like defy everything I've taught them in theory 1 and 2 and 3 about how form works at all. So like pieces that have no cadences at all, except the very last moment in the whole, like there's a Brahms intermezzo where the sections change either using only modulation, only like range on the piano, or when he brings back the original A theme, he brings it back in augmentation, right? It's like twice as long, so it's really painfully obvious, like the A section is back now, right? But there's no other traditional sort of, you can't make little arches with 1 through 4 on them because that's not really in there, at least not in the way that I've taught them before. And I think like you get much better results, much better discussions, and much less fear when you let the edges be all blurry. Yeah. Because if they think there's like some perfect right answer that I'm looking for, then that's all they're ever going to be looking for. But I don't want them to look for my right answer. I want them to like look at the music and see what's really there, in the big picture, and learn how to describe it in a way that conveys what they really mean and what they really see, which is hard to do about music. So I just love that. I think that's great. And I love the versatility that just drop a YouTube link in and there you go,
Yeah, it's pretty, it's at a normal person's level, how much interest they're ready to get into. Just put the link in there. And I like that formal flexibility too. I'm really inspired by Janet Schmalfeld's process of becoming, just this idea that you're doing this and now you're doing that. And so in the theory that I have on my website, I talk about using the formal labels as adjectives instead of like actual like containers. It's like now it has the properties right now of a primary theme. That's really all I'm saying here. And then encourage lots of question marks, right, and quotation marks, and say like, I think it's this, type of listening.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to using this in a week or 2 with my Theory 4 class, because we have a final unit in popular music, and popular music is so ambiguous these days. We were analyzing a Dua Lipa song from the Barbie movie, and just the form, and there's multiple pre-choruses, there's a refrain, but also a chorus, and I'm like, well, what's the difference between that? And I think it's so fascinating because we had a lot of interesting discussions on like, well, what makes something a refrain versus a chorus, or and things like that. And so giving them the opportunity to just like put these ideas out there and see it visually rather than in a score, or when we were looking at it, we were just using like a chord chart. So we didn't even have like staff notation. But I love the fact that they can all make their own, and then let's compare what's how would we label this section and the why, and not trying to get this one right answer, because I'll go back to my composer hat. Like most people aren't writing particular forms. They're like, I'm going to write a sonata form, right? Or like it's just
unless they're in freshman composition lessons, right?
Right, exactly. And unless it's an assignment, and then you give them like a a sonata by Scarlatti, and it's not sonata form. Like, what the heck is that?
No, that's true.
But like the form just happens out of decisions that a composer or a group of songwriters makes, and then and there's a lot of reasons why they might do something differently, but it's very bespoke in a way. I think a lot of these, especially for popular music these days.
Yeah, and I wanted to do, like I said, I do lots of different genres, and so I wanted to make sure. And I have I have the most complex phrase diagrams that I've ever seen, and I didn't think about that when I made them, but when I realize now that I think I'm doing a little more complex than is maybe needed. I don't know, but I wanted the tool to be able to express all of those things, like to show different overlaps, or that the phrase didn't end properly, or that now a new phrase started, or something like that. So there's a whole bunch of different shape options to handle that, and handle phrase expansion and popular music, of course, as well. But I agree, that's the students. They show me such interesting things. They say things that sound, when they say them, kind of crazy, but it's so often that when I just say they're picking their piece, they're diving into it, they care about it. And I had a girl show me this piece, and she said, I think I'm a little confused, because I think this part here is the pre-chorus. It feels like it's building. And then the next section, I think, is the post-chorus. And, right on the face of it, you're like, of course that's not true. And then I listen to it, and I'm like, I understand exactly what you're saying. Is this real? Like, what are you talking? Absolutely. It seems like you must absolutely have a chorus. You can't have a pre and then a post and not have one. But she was really onto something, and that happens pretty regularly. Like, and I've really noticed when I let them pick their own music that they're always willing to do more than I would have gotten out of them originally. And so I usually like to have these little sessions in class where they pick out when they do a project, and I say, just come in. I'll be here for 2 hours, and then I'll help you work on it. You can work with other people or something. They're all doing different pieces, so it's a good experience for them. And I say, just for practical reasons, try to just submit it before the end of class. Just when you're here, then you'll know you're done and you can leave. And then so often there's a lot of students at the end, and I'm like, oh, did you finish? And they're like, yeah. There was I just want to look at this one section just a little bit more before I do it, and I'm like, yes. I win, like that's all I ever wanted, is just you to engage and feel like you're connected to this piece of music more than you were, and my gosh, you're really doing it. Yeah. So it's a fun tool to use in class. I definitely recommend doing it, because like you said, you just put it up on the screen, and I don't have one, but if you had a smart board, one of those ones that you could do in class, I don't know if you guys have those.
No.
I do.
You have one of those? You really should try it and let me know, because I bet that actually is a lot of fun to like really touch it and say split it here, and it could be a lot of fun that way. But I do a lot of exercises that way. I just put it up on screen, put the YouTube video, and then you can just talk about locations. You could talk about harmony, you could talk about form, because it's just this little timeline, and you can mark things and then go back and say, listen to right here. And that location of here is very clear. You can just put a little marker in there. And it's super engaging for the students, because you're kind of replacing, how we're all supposed to have piano chops when we're teaching, so that you can say, this location right here. That's what you say, like right here, and like you're playing. You could be listening to recording too, but you know what I mean? It's like, but you can replace that, the most complicated of music that you can find. Now you can say right here in a different way. So it's a lot of fun to use in class for sure.
One thing I thought about when I first saw it was, this has to do with just practical implications as well. When I know a piece of music really well, I feel like I can almost have this zoomed out view of the form in my head, that like it kind of represents like a way of understanding a piece, that you can almost think about the whole piece in one bit. Like, and you get that as soon as you look at BriFormer, like you see like this whole thing, how it's parsed. And like if you also want to think about the piece like of sections within sections, right? Always you could think about that too. And like some pieces that I played, for example, in Hershey, like we showed up and we had to learn 50 tunes, in 5 days. And you think, well, how would you learn 50 tunes in 5 days? Well, you learn the form of them. Like that's what you actually use to memorize them, because like then you can picture, okay, we're going to do this particular thing 3 times, and then we're going to change to this thing, and then we're going to do this for the ending. You know what I mean? And it's like you find yourself actually like doing form without like, and I had no experience with Kaplan or sonata theory or something, but like I knew form by the requirement of memorizing music really quickly and having to like just stuff it all into my head really quickly. And like the more I talk to like conductors, the more I find out that like when they picture pieces, they're also like picturing the form of the piece and then like how they would break that down for rehearsals or like how they would break that down for phrasing and expression and like things like that. Like it really does connect with some sort of basic level of musical understanding that somehow is across many, many, many different genres. And I really appreciate that about your software. It's really cool.
Well, and I think our understanding of form even goes deeper to like when you're younger. Like I have a distinct memory of playing bass drum in like 5th grade band. And when you're playing bass drum in 5th grade band, you're always playing quarter notes or half notes or whole notes, right? And it's like just a sheet full of those notes. And I remember playing and I realized that I could feel the 4-bar phrase. I couldn't say it's a 4-bar phrase, but I knew, oh, I'm going to come back to this right here. And I didn't have to be watching every single measure, like, cause I could literally like feel the anticipation for that next 4 bars. And I think any of our music students can feel that too, and probably have that experience of that, just like the knowing of when it sounds right. And that happens in all types of music. And then it's really interesting when we have that feeling and then it doesn't happen in the music. And you're like, oh, what's that all about? Is that allowed? And that gets really cool.
You asked about my project with Megan Levengood, Ben, I think. The Auralayer.
Yeah, we should talk about Auralayer too. Am I saying that right? Auralayer, because the L is like an elision, right?
It's
aural, but it's layer, but it's Auralayer.
It's your fascination with like unclear forms, right? Is it the beginning or the end of the word? Is it
BriFormer,
right?
Auralayer.
Oh man!
Wow.
So you'd have to get Megan back on the podcast and ask her. In the early stages, she was like, "I'm thinking Auralayer," and I say it out loud, and I'm like, most music theorists don't know the difference between the word aural and oral. I don't know if we really want to, go this route, or at least they like to say them the same,
Right.
And so she was like, I'm a little self-conscious about the name, and I was like, okay. So I talked with ChatGPT, and I was like, hey, give me 10 names for a software that does this, and I got them, and I sent them to her, and she was like, no, I'll stick with Auralayer. But yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one to say. It's a nice name to look at, I think. It's better to look at than to say, I think.
It almost feels like a palindrome or something. There's like a lovely symmetry with the L and the 2 A's on the side. Yeah. Auralayer. Auralayer.
We need a nickname.
A fuzzy symmetry.
Yeah. But Megan had asked me, I'd been thinking about Megan, actually, when I was writing BriFormer, because I told her about it, and I was like, you should try it out. And she tried it out in her class, and she said she liked it, and the students liked it. But I was thinking, but I know what Megan wants. I know what Megan wants, something for timbre. I bet that's what she wants. And then like 6 months later, she's like, hey, Brian, are you interested in making something like BriFormer, but it's for timbre? And I was like, yes, I am. And so she was like, can we, the SMT interest group has a timbre and orchestration interest group. And I was thinking we could like have something to show. And so I think she emailed me on like September 1st, and then, SMT is November 1st or, whatever. It was like a couple months away. I was like, in hindsight, we probably should have added an entire year into this development cycle. But it was kind of like I did all the programming and she did the design of what it would look like and some of the other features that it would need, because she is the timbre expert. I wanted something like this that they could use timbre and just add new layers. And essentially what you do is create a DAW-like picture, of where stuff happens. And so I wrote that as quickly as possible. It works pretty well. It still has a couple of like, not bugs, but quality of life sorts of issues, or, like where you would want to be a power user. It lacks like power user types of features. Whereas BriFormer, I've been able to add those in. There's like a keyboard shortcut for like everything.
Okay, confessions. I don't know what a power user. I must not be one.
I guess not. Is that not a normal word? Power user.
I'm picturing just like the blocks of sound that represent different timbres in different colors, right?
Yeah.
What
Well,
would
I'm
a
just-
power
so-
user
It's how
do
you're
with that, or-
manipulating the
Right.
interface.
Yeah. So like.
like when you zoom in and you take a note up a semitone or something?
Nope, still way off.
Thinking about like.
Be
know,
broader,
like-
Ben. Be
You
broader.
better delete this,
Be
Paul.
bigger picture.
Like in MuseScore finale, I don't know what a regular user, everything would be controlled by the mouse. They would click on a note and they would slide it up, and they would click on the accidental button, and they would, but
It's like
a power
Command
user.
S, Command Z, Command C,
Yeah.
Okay, like in
start
finale
to
when
learn.
you are in speedy entry.
Yeah, you start.
And you're just
Gotcha.
playing it in and like hitting your
Okay.
Right.
Sorry for the interruption.
No. But BriFormer has all the keyboard shortcuts. You can kind of work. You can work a little faster, and Auralayer simply lacks that sort of power user aspect. So it all there just kind of needs some. Once you start to do a couple, you probably like, I wish I could do all this at once, or something like that. But yeah, so she's been pushing timbre, and it's really nice to have it as a tool, because timbre is super important, but a lot of us don't do it, including me, not yet. But I'm going to. With this tool, it'll be great. Like, just do your timbre analysis of this piece. I want to hear the percussion lines only, or whatever. There's a lot of potential for people to see timbre and share it, and that is one of the things I really wanted to do with Forum. You know how difficult it is to have just for as an example, an audio timeliner file and share it with someone else and them see it, like. You know how much work that is, right? There's an audio file involved that you have to send to them. They have to have the program installed. They need your file. They open up that program. Then they have to find the file, and then they have to find the audio file. Which is fine. That's not crazy. It's just, when today you can just hit share on something and now put it somewhere. Like, that's kind of the speed we're at right now. And so that's kind of what I wanted with these programs, is be like, I did a great thing. I did an analysis. Here it is I'm posting on Instagram, and go look at it, That'd be a fun way to experience music theory, because like you guys were talking about, there's something super intuitive about form. Like, I think people really hear it really easily a lot of times, and if you can just kind of capture that in an image, they're like, oh, I'm doing advanced music theory, and I just with my ears and my insight, intuition.
Yeah. Well, and I think it gets away from like the spectrograms, and because like, what do those show? How do I read that? And Megan does a lot of great things in kind of just describing the different timbres and showing them on the spectrograms. But that's not something that most people are even know what they're looking at. Like, what is this?
Right.
When they think of sound, they think of this. They don't think of like this, like all these bumps and these red and green things like that. So I think this Auralayer helps to put it in a package that you can approach a little bit easier than just like looking at a bunch of spectrograms.
Yeah, and she talks about that struggle of like, I mean, even just getting the software installed, like I was talking about, is super annoying. But there is something really unnatural about seeing it. It's like finding out that the world is made of electrons, and you're like, what are you? That's crazy. And if you saw a picture of that, it'd just be meaningless, right? So it's like, it's true, but it doesn't connect with you too immediately. But those things they're super fascinating, those spectrograms and that sort of thing.
But you have to like teach the tool. If you want to use it in a class, you have to teach the tool before you can use it to teach something. And there are things where it's worth doing that for. I mean, in a sense, solfege is the same thing. You have to teach the tool, and they have to kind of learn how to use the tool before they can like really use it, and it makes it better. But it's worth it because they can learn it pretty fast. They might have already learned it before, right? All of those things. But there are some things where you're like, is it worth it to teach this tool?
Yes.
Before I teach this topic,
Yeah.
Especially in a class like Theory 2 or something, where there's a lot to do.
Right.
This has been so great, Brian, having you on. And listeners, please check these out. We'll have these links in our show notes and things. And we're actually going to be making a website soon, so we're getting legit. And so please check them out. They're incredible resources, especially if you are interested in form, timbre. You have visual learners. I think these are great tools. Before we let you go, we always like to ask, as you know, some rapid fire questions. that we come up with off the cuff. I have mine based off of something earlier you said. So if Jen or Ben, if you want to go first, or I can go first.
You can go. I have one, but you can go.
Okay. So this is related to sight reading, because I love the fact that you are a sight reading aficionado, and so mad respect for that. You have a student that says, "How do I get better at sight reading?" What do you answer?
My general philosophy for that one is take 4 steps back for where you think you should be, and open up the sight. So I deal with usually sophomores and juniors. So at that time, we do the Rogers Ottman Music for Sight Singing book, and so we're in the further chapters. But what I tell them is go back to chapter 2, and convince yourself that you can totally nail these rhythms. And so go way back. With music so easy, you think you're almost embarrassed. That's where you want to be, and then kind of build up from there. The other way that worked for me the most was I was just really curious about music, and so I would just get out a score and be like, "What does this feel like?" And I would go through it, and that was it was painful, obviously, early on, but that helped a lot. Just doing the act of sight reading. And then different levels of it, and trying to be build the confidence that you can do it at easy levels, but then play little games like don't play a certain measure but come in on time for the next measure, and be able to just go in and out and accept a really high margin of loss, but don't give up. I think that's my general thought there. Yeah,
that's great. I love that.
That is great. Ben, do you want me to go, or are you ready?
Sure, I'll go.
Okay.
Mine's about Katy Perry. Since Brian and I presented in the same session, I couldn't go to his Katy Perry. I was talking about film music, and he's talking about Katy Perry. So what's your favorite Katy Perry song, and why?
I'm such a bad favorite person. I'm so bad at it. It's something about being a perfectionist and realizing that I haven't truly answered the question properly that really makes it hard for me. What's my favorite composer? What's my favorite movie? I'm so bad at it.
That's why it's perfect for rapid fire. No one ever wants to answer what's their
really?
favorite composer
Yeah,
or whatever.
Yeah, because as soon as my grandma used to say this thing, which is we'd ask her, "Who's your favorite grandchild?" And she's smarter than that, she's not going to fall for that. So she would say it's whichever child's in my lap at that time, and which is such a cop out, but she's also absolutely right. So it kind of tends to be something like that, whichever one I'm listening to is the full experience, and But no, I don't know. I don't think I'm ready to say a favorite. I don't know.
But do you sometimes feel like a plastic bag? You ever feel like that?
Only if he has the eye of the tiger.
I will say I love a good music video. I absolutely love music videos, and so most of her songs that are popular, the popular ones have music videos. I guess it's like a financial thing they all do, right? But there's a really weird one, Birthday. There's a lyric video, and then there's a regular one, and it's not the most popular of her songs. But the birthday one's really weird. She goes to all these kids' birthday parties and wears really horrible masks and things like that, and bursts out of them. And she's like, "I'm Katy Perry," and it's weird.
It's really creepy, especially if you have young kids.
Yeah, and you don't get a lot of weird from Katy Perry, so I think it really stands out for me. That's a good song too. There's funny sexual innuendo in that song, and I definitely enjoy that. But that, which is also the weirder part, that the lyrics are so suggestive, and then she's scaring kids at their birthday parties,
It's odd. It's odd, the combination. I totally agree. Everything was just
worth a watch, though.
That's pretty fun.
That's great.
Okay, so for mine, I'm kind of making an assumption that since you didn't start really playing piano until you were 20, that's when you also kind of learned to read music. That's the assumption that I'm making. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So, I learned to read music as a little kid. And then now I do it for my career, right? So I'm often trying to kind of picture my students who are really, truly learning to read music for the first time at 18 years old. What are they experiencing, and how can I make it easier or more efficient or something like that? So is there something about that experience of learning to read music as an adult, basically, that you think, we should know as people who teach students in that position?
I think I have an answer you don't want. I think it is the answer, and I think it's motivation. When they're not motivated, it's all difficult. So I got faster at it for two reasons. One, like I said, I was just really interested, so I was always going through music, and that just made me better at doing it. So I just didn't have to head up and down, move my head up and down all the time. And there was another thing. My teacher put a little bit of fear into me, which also helped with the motivation. And she said, a lot of times, Brian, when people start later, like you, they don't get really good at reading music very well. They have kind of a problem with that. And I was like, well, I told you I want to do this forever, so that's not gonna happen to me, So I think that's like that fear of you won't make it unless you can do this did help me be motivated at the same time. But no, outside of that, I think those are really important. The motivation thing is just important for everything. But I think I'm just as surprised as you when it takes forever, when reading the music takes forever. And it didn't take very long for me, and they've been doing, and a lot of times students have been doing it for a really long time, and I don't understand what is so difficult. I literally remember learning it, and so it could be a combination of like mathematics. I'm fine with mathematics. I don't have that problem, and I know there's a correlation between the two of mathematical ability and understanding basics of music theory. Yeah. No, that's I wish I had something for you, but I think that motivation thing, which is what I've tried to tie in and continually tie into my classes, is the best thing that you can figure out. What motivates this person, and somehow if you can tie that in, and trying to avoid fear as a motivator, or some people, I guess that works, but a lot of kids close up. So yeah, if you could find motivation, that's probably the answer.
That's true. I think the closest I've ever come to like really having that experience was at the pedagogy workshops. Lee Van Handel made us like rename the musical alphabet starting on J, and then spell chords. And I was like,
yep, that's what it feels like. Yep.
Okay, so K, M. I mean, like, and that was a moment where I was like, oh my gosh, this is what it feels like. I get it.
If you play in a clef
like
that you never play in, it'll happen immediately. Put some accidentals in there, and it's all over. So it's funny to go back to that feeling, and so that would be some of the reasons I wrote some of these apps. So one of the programs that I have that I'm sure absolutely nobody uses, but it's on my website, and it's called Clef Master, and I built it because I'm bad at alto clef. And so like I built this little game, and it shows a note, and it's connected with a MIDI keyboard. You need to use like Chrome, but you connect your MIDI keyboard in there, and it'll show a note on the staff, and you play it, and then, and it has a little point system and that sort of thing, and you kind of sort of level up. It's a very simple game. But yeah, I still know exactly what it's like to be bad at it. Just toss a new clef in there, and it's a really interesting experience. But that's why I think the game thing could be if we could get people to make games. I'm going to try to make some games, but what I really want is someone who's good at making games to make a better one, so that it really does great things. And I think there's a whole nother level of music theory education that games could really take it. You could really enjoy it a lot and get a lot better at it. So I'm kind of hoping that happens. I'll do my best to do little bits here and there, but I'm kind of hoping somebody really does something, Guitar Hero level, but for the stuff we really do,
Well, there is Duolingo music theory now, apparently, but my students have said it's terrible.
I checked it out. I think I watched a video on it. I don't know if I downloaded it myself, but I watched someone like hacking it. It could have been like one of those little short videos or something like that, but it says play C, and they just take their finger and run it across the keyboard left and right, and it will give you the correct answer. Like yes, and you're just you're not doing it at all. They're so good at just finding those little problems. Yeah.
Apparently, there's a lot of like two finger playing that you have to do, which I think is very practical. I think for musicians these days.
All those people wanting to get really good at chopsticks.
That's right. That's right. Well, as we wrap up, maybe let our listeners know a little bit about how they can find you, your website, and also what kind of things you might have cooking in the coming months or years ahead.
Sure. I have an odd request. Can I do my own rapid fire answer to a question that you've asked a lot of other people?
Yes.
Ooh. Oh yeah. Is it movable dough? Is it
No.
6/4 chord?
It's 6/4 chords.
Oh,
It's
6/4 chord.
6/4 chords.
Oh,
yeah.
the oldie but a goodie.
Yeah. So usually you guys ask, I think you say 1/6/4 or 5/6/4 is maybe the question sometimes.
Yeah.
And I remember Jenn said something that I heard someone else say, not on the podcast, and we were talking about doing a cadential 6/4 as a 5/6/4, and they said that it's the one time that the Roman numeral doesn't match the notes. And I thought, what? And so I've been so this question of like, what did you say? And I heard somebody else say it, so I was like, what did you say? And I realized I'm doing things, and a lot of other people are doing things very differently from that. I have figures all over my Roman numerals, and they're to show embellishing tones. It's not just that one time. So, for example, if it were just instead of like 5/6/4, let's say it's a 4/3 suspension, 5 with a 4/3. I don't put them in the score. I put them on the Roman numeral. So it says Roman numeral 5 4-3, and then same thing for like any of the suspensions. Even neighbor 6/4 chords, it's not 1 4/6/4 1 or 1 neighbor 6/4 1. It's 1 and then just a bunch of figures that show the movement of the voices. And the same thing for when you have a classical cadence and they do it in a slow movement, they do the 5/7 the bass makes it over the bar line, but the upper parts don't. They like stay and then they resolve down. So that one's a real nasty looking one. It's a 9-8-7-8-4-3 right on the Roman numeral. So I was realizing like if people are only doing it that one time, like I fully recommend not to do it. It doesn't make any sense to do it one time. Like either do it or kind of get out of there. But anyways, that's my.
So we don't teach figure bass until theory 3 because our theory 1 and 2, we have such a large population of music business majors, and we found that figured bass was like robbing the joy out of
it's a terrible
music theory for them. Because, all the repertoire is quite a bit older. A lot of it they've never interacted with. They don't understand why they're having to do it, whatever. So for us, it truly is the one and only time that they ever see, like, figures like that. Now, 4/3, they will do because that is in popular music. A sus4 or whatever. They know what that is. So we will put that, like, on a Roman numeral or whatever. But it's really kind of the only time for us. And so that's why... That's why I phrased it like that. But yeah, that's interesting.
That's a huge pet peeve of mine. The thing you brought up is using figured bass for inversion in 21st century. It's wrong. It's wrong. It's so bad. It's so slow. It's the worst way to ask the question that you're trying to ask. Like you're trying to ask like, is the root of the chord in the bass? Oh no, then what is? That is the general question. And instead you write 4/3. You write 4/2. And then it's the longest trail to teach somebody this obscure stuff. So yeah, I'm all for getting rid of that. So answer your actual question, Paul. Sorry.
Well, you didn't actually. Are you 5/6/4 or are you 1/6/4? Or are you something else?
My official position is no figures for inversion, but figures only for when melody impacts the sense of harmony. That's my stand.
Okay.
So it's just super flexible. You can use those numbers to just classify anything that's getting in the way of what you called the chord quality, basically.
Okay.
And so those 6/4 things are embellishing tones, not inversion.
Yeah.
So they would qualify. Yeah, as okay. Yeah. It's such a fun question. I always think about it when you guys ask it. I'm like, what do I think about that? And like I thought about the question. But,
well, in addition to pondering the meanings of cadences, what else are you planning on doing?
I'm planning on actually working on this issue. I have another program called Analysis Master, and it's really taught me the problems with harmonic analysis notation and that sort of thing. So I'm developing a general approach to harmonic analysis that's very explicit and very verbose and not efficient, but it works everywhere type of thing. And so if you think about something like, it's kind of what we were just talking about, but if you think about, if I say to you a 5/4-3 chord, you parse that in your mind, right? You have a Roman numeral and it's capital, right? I didn't say that, but you did it, right? And then you have a 4 and a 3 and they're vertical. which should also be, if you talk about the suspension we were just talking about, a 5-chord with a 4/3 suspension is also 5/4/3. But you say it to someone else and they come hump with 543, right? Like somehow we've learned,
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like trying to investigate all of those little annoyances, and there's so many of them, including you can't do addition in intervals. A third plus a third is a fifth. That's real bad.
Yep.
Yep.
So kind of curious about where's the movement in these systems, like that we can actually clean up just to make it easier and faster. Kind of what to Jen's point of like, this is slowing everyone down and it's not helping, and there's got to be a lot more efficient ways. But some things are just too entrenched, but I still think there's some room to move there. So I'm kind of working on that. But I've really moved over to sort of data science and music type of stuff, and that gets me to work with my computer even more, which I love. But I like creating like curated data sets, smaller curated data sets where I know who did it, which is me. But I know that it wasn't random. The computer didn't decide upon the parameters. And if you look at a lot of big music data sets that are available online, you can believe the weird things they say. Like I looked at a Spotify one that had all the tempo for all the top, 1,000 songs or something. And then some of the tempi were like 220, 225. And I was like, what? I got to hear that, And then I'd go to it and it was like, definitely 60, and like, so I have all of this doubt about data sets and I don't know who collected it. I don't know anything. And so I like to make smaller ones that I feel like this was done by a person that knows what's going on. So I've been working on my Katy Perry project that Ben mentioned. I'm kind of going up a level and doing verse chorus differences in modern popular music, and she's just going to be a portion of that. But generally, that type of thing, data science, and I'm trying to get more involved with artificial neural networks and just different machine learning functions, and explain music to myself and hopefully to some other people better than I currently have.
That's great. That's fascinating.
And if you want to look at... sorry, go ahead, Paul.
No, go for it.
I was just going to say, if you want to... My stuff is on my website. I'm not on social media. I only lurk on Reddit. But if you type into my name as Brian Edward Jarvis, Brian with an I, into Google, it should come up. You could type in BriFormer, and it'll probably come up there, and Bri with an I, and it's because my name is Brian, which is a reference to Linux, which is the creator's first name is Linus, and it's Linus's version of Unix, and so I just thought that was cute. So that's why it's called that. So that would probably be the easiest way, is my website, see what's going on. But certainly send me an email if you're interested in learning about those programs, and I can send you the tutorial links or whatever.
You just made it to the end of another episode of Note Doctors, the music theory and pedagogy podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and review the podcast, and you can always reach us at notedoctorspodcast@gmail.com with comments, questions, or show ideas. Thanks for listening.